You want to hear something funny? Everybody remembers the Shine Box line. Everybody remembers Tommy exploding. Everybody remembers Billy Batts hitting that nerve like he knew exactly where to press. But the question that really lingers after the scene is not just why Tommy signed his own death warrant that night. The real question is why Jimmy walked away from the same murder like nothing happened. Because if you think about it, for more than 5 seconds, it does not make sense on the surface. Tommy DeVito and Jimmy Conway both helped kill Billy Batts. They both got their hands dirty. They both helped make the body disappear. They both knew exactly how dangerous it was. And in that world, killing a made man without permission is not a small mistake. It is not a misunderstanding. It is a capital offense. So if Billy Batts was connected, protected, and important enough for his murder to eventually bring hell down on Tommy, then why was Jimmy not taken out too? That is where this story gets interesting, because the answer tells you everything about how the mob really works in Goodfellas. It is not just about rules. It is not just about loyalty. And it is definitely not about fairness. It is about value. It is about politics. It is about who makes money, who causes trouble, who can be sacrificed, and who is still too useful to lose. And once you understand that, the Billy Batts murder stops looking like one hot-headed mistake at the bar and starts looking like one of the clearest examples in the whole movie of how mob justice really works. So let's go back to the beginning, because this whole thing starts with one of the most uncomfortable reunions in the film. Billy Batts has just gotten out of prison after doing 6 years. He is back in the neighborhood, back in the bars, back among the guys, and from the second he shows up, the mood changes. Tommy walks in, sees Batts, and you can feel it immediately. He is irritated before a word is even spoken. He mutters to Henry that he forgot Billy was getting out that day. And right there, you already know this is not going anywhere good. Now, Billy, for his part, does not exactly act like a man trying to keep the peace. He is hugging Tommy, grabbing him, leaning into him, smiling too much, talking too loud. Maybe he is just drunk and happy to be out. Maybe he is trying to show affection in the usual neighborhood way. Or maybe, and I think this is more likely, he sees Tommy's attitude and decides to play with him a little. Because Billy Batts is not just talking to some random loudmouth. He is talking to Tommy, a guy with a short fuse and a giant ego, and he knows exactly what he is doing when he starts telling that old story about Tommy's shining shoes. That is the moment everybody remembers. Tommy is already holding himself together by a thread, and then Billy hits him with that little bit of humiliation, dressed up like a joke. Suddenly, Tommy is not just annoyed. He is exposed. He is being reduced in front of everybody. He is being reminded of what he used to be, of where he came from, of how some people in that room still see him. And for a guy like Tommy, that is not harmless teasing. That is an attack. That is why the exchange feels so dangerous. Billy is laughing, but he is also establishing rank. He is saying, in effect, I knew you when you were nothing, and I can still talk to you like that. And Tommy, who has spent his entire life trying to become the kind of man nobody can disrespect, simply cannot take it. He storms out, furious, humiliated, boiling inside, and for a moment you think maybe that is the end of it. But of course it is not the end of it. In Goodfellas, when a guy like Tommy leaves the room like that, that is not resolution. That is a countdown. He comes back later. The mood is different. The laughter is gone. And then almost before Billy can react, Tommy sucker punches him right in the face and puts him on the floor. Jimmy jumps in too. They start stomping him, kicking him, beating him, while Henry watches in horror, because Henry understands what this means, even if the audience does not fully get it yet. This is not just another beating. This is a disaster, because Billy Batts is not some nobody. Billy Batts is a made guy. He is a member of the Gambino family, and in that world, that matters more than almost anything else. A made man is protected. A made man is not supposed to be touched without serious approval from higher up. You do not just kill one because he insulted you in a bar. If you do that, you are not merely picking a fight with one guy. You are insulting the structure itself. You are stepping across a line that can get everybody around you killed. That is why Henry's narration in the movie hits so hard. He explains that Batts was a made man and Tommy was not. And if you know anything about how the mafia works, you immediately understand the scale of the problem. This is not barroom violence anymore. This is politics, blood, and consequences. So the obvious answer seems simple at first. Tommy eventually gets killed for it. Case closed. That is the price. That is the revenge. That is the system correcting itself. But when you look closer, it still leaves a giant hole in the story. Jimmy was there too. Jimmy helped finish the job. Jimmy helped move the body. Jimmy was every bit as involved in the murder itself. So why is the punishment aimed at Tommy and Tommy alone? Well, there are really two ways to look at it. There is the movie world answer, and then there is the real life answer. And the fascinating part is that both of them point in the same direction. Let's start inside the world of the movie. One thing the film makes very clear is that Tommy is already a problem long before Billy Batts. Paulie knows it. Henry knows it. Jimmy knows it. Tommy is impulsive, reckless, violent, and impossible to control. He is the kind of guy who can make you laugh 1 minute and get you killed the next. That makes him entertaining to watch, but in a criminal organization, it also makes him a liability. Guys like Paulie do not want chaos unless chaos is profitable. Tommy's kind of chaos is not profitable. It is expensive. It attracts attention. It creates enemies. It makes business harder. Jimmy, on the other hand, is the opposite kind of criminal. Jimmy is dangerous too, of course, but Jimmy is useful. Jimmy earns. That is the key. In the mafia, a man who makes a lot of money can get away with things that would bury somebody else. That is one of the oldest truths in that world. A volatile guy who causes trouble and does not bring in enough money is expendable. A guy who fills envelopes, kicks up to the right people, and keeps the cash flowing is much harder to sacrifice. And Jimmy is not just a decent earner. He is one of the best. Even though he is only an associate and can never become a made man because he is not fully Italian, he still has enormous value. He brings in money, opportunities, scores, and connections. He is the kind of person bosses tolerate because he makes everybody richer. So from Paulie's point of view, once Billy Batts disappears and the heat starts building, the choice is ugly but practical. The Gambinos are going to want someone to answer for this. Somebody has to pay. Somebody has to be offered up directly or indirectly to settle the debt. If Paulie protects everybody, he risks a larger war and invites retaliation from more powerful men. If he gives up Tommy, he solves multiple problems at once. He satisfies the revenge for Batts. He gets rid of a guy who has always been difficult, and he keeps Jimmy alive, which means the money keeps coming. That is how organizations like this think. Not morally, not emotionally, structurally. Who is worth more alive? Who is worth more dead? Who creates more headaches than dollars? Who can still be used tomorrow? When you ask the question that way, the answer becomes pretty obvious. Tommy is the easier sacrifice. In fact, for some people, losing Tommy may have felt like a relief. And there is another important detail the movie quietly suggests. Publicly, Tommy is the one with the clear motive. Tommy is the one Billy insults. Tommy is the one who storms out. Tommy is the one whose pride gets shredded in front of everyone. If people are reconstructing what happened later, Tommy's involvement is easy to see. His rage was visible. The confrontation was in the open. Bats had gotten under his skin in front of witnesses. Jimmy's role, by contrast, is easier to blur, minimize, or deny. Inside the bar, Jimmy is respectful. Henry is respectful too. They are not the ones openly feuding with Billy. So if somebody needs to control the narrative afterward, it is not that hard to make this look like Tommy's personal explosion rather than a broader conspiracy. That matters because mob justice is not always based on complete truth. It is often based on a manageable version of the truth. The version that preserves money, hierarchy, and stability usually wins. Now, there is also Jimmy's own personal motive in all this, and this is where things get even darker. Jimmy was not just helping Tommy out of friendship that night. Jimmy had his own reasons to want Billy gone. Billy Batts had a racket Jimmy had been running while Billy was in prison. Billy gets out, and naturally, he wants it back. He did his time. He comes home. He has mouths to feed. That line in the movie is not there by accident. It tells you exactly what the tension underneath the whole scene really is. Billy's return is not just socially awkward, it is financially inconvenient. And that changes Jimmy's involvement from simple loyalty to self-interest. Billy coming home means Jimmy may have to hand something back. It means Jimmy may lose income. It means an old arrangement expires. For a guy like Jimmy, that is never good news. So when Tommy explodes, Jimmy is not stepping into a random mess. He is helping remove a business problem. That does not mean he planned the whole thing from the start, but it does mean that once the moment arrives, he has every reason to go along with it. And again, that makes it even more revealing that Jimmy is still spared, because if the mob were truly applying its own rules equally, Jimmy's self-interest and active role in the murder should have put him in the line of fire too. But equality has never really been the point. Utility is the point. Now let's step out of the movie for a second and look at the real life version, because the story there gets even messier. In real life, Tommy DeVito was based on Thomas DeSimone and Jimmy Conway was based on Jimmy Burke. And according to various accounts that came out over the years, DeSimone was not killed only because of Billy Batts. That was the central offense, yes, but there were supposedly other reasons too, other incidents, other people he had angered, other lines he had crossed. In some versions of the story, he had become such a toxic presence that once the opportunity came to get rid of him, multiple grievances got rolled into one execution. That lines up perfectly with how the film presents Tommy. He is not just guilty of one catastrophic mistake. He is a pattern. He is a guy who leaves damage everywhere he goes. Billy Batts might have been the final trigger, but the gun had been loaded for a long time. And then you get into the really ugly claims from Henry Hill's later accounts, where he suggested that Tommy had also attacked Karen Hill, and that this created even more pressure from powerful people around Polverio, the real-life Paulie. If those accounts are accurate, then Tommy was not just reckless in the street, he was crossing internal lines too. He was turning himself from an asset into a danger inside his own circle. At that point, protecting him becomes harder and harder to justify. Jimmy Burke, meanwhile, remained too valuable. Even some accounts that suggest higher-ranking people knew Jimmy had a hand in the Billy Batts murder also suggest he was spared because of what he earned. Think about how insane that is for a second. A man may have been involved in the murder of a made guy, and the argument for keeping him alive is essentially this: yes, but he makes too much money. That is the mob in one sentence. People love to romanticize mafia codes. They talk about honor and rules and loyalty as if it is some ancient system with internal purity. But scenes like this expose what it often really comes down to. The rules exist, yes, but the rules bend around money. If you are useful enough, discipline gets complicated. If you are troublesome enough, discipline becomes easy. Tommy had become expensive. Jimmy was still profitable. And the movie understands this completely. That is why Tommy's death is staged the way it is. He is told he is going to be made the greatest honor he could imagine, and instead he walks into a room and gets shot in the face. It is not just an execution, it is a correction, a settling of accounts, a message. And the bitter irony is perfect, because Tommy has spent the whole movie craving status, demanding respect, refusing humiliation, and in the end, he is eliminated like somebody whose fate had already been decided in rooms he was never allowed into. Jimmy, on the other hand, keeps moving. He keeps earning. He keeps building. He survives not because he is innocent, but because he is still worth something to the men above him. That, to me, is the real answer to the question. Why was Jimmy not whacked for killing Billy Batts? Because Tommy was the easier target, the clearer problem, and the less valuable man. Because Tommy had a public motive and a private history of chaos. Because Jimmy could be protected, excused, blurred into the background, and most importantly, monetized. Because in the mafia, punishment is not always about who is most guilty. It is often about who is most disposable. And that is why the Billy Batts murder is one of the smartest parts of Goodfellas. On the surface, it looks like a story about temper. A guy gets insulted. He overreacts. He creates a crisis. But underneath that, it is really a story about structure, about how even in a world that claims to have rules, those rules are filtered through politics, money, rank, and usefulness. Tommy breaks the rule. Jimmy helps break the rule. But only one of them is truly built to be sacrificed. Once you see that, the whole movie opens up in a different way. You start realizing that so much of what happens in Goodfellas is not about justice at all. It is about management. Problems are managed. Heat is managed. Money is managed. Even murder is managed. Billy Batts is not just dead because Tommy lost control. Billy Batts becomes part of a larger equation. And when that equation is solved, Tommy is the number that gets crossed out. Jimmy is left standing because Jimmy still has economic weight. He is a machine for income. He is a connector. He is a planner. He is the kind of criminal bosses hate to lose. And when a criminal organization starts making those calculations, everything else becomes negotiable. That is why the question matters, because it gets to the heart of what Goodfellas is really saying. This is not a world of noble gangsters living by sacred codes. This is a world where the code exists until money says otherwise. A world where a made man can be murdered, where revenge can be delayed, redirected, or narrowed, and where the final decision is less about honor than about strategic loss. So yes, Tommy paid for Billy Batts, but not only for Billy Batts, and Jimmy avoided paying for Billy Batts, not because he was cleaner, not because he was less involved, and definitely not because the system was fair. He avoided paying because he was still too valuable to kill. And in that world, that is about the closest thing there is to innocence.